So if you're just starting triathlon and you're not sure what kit you need, this is a full list of everything you'll need from the swim, the bike, the run, the transition, training, and everything in between. If you want to skip to different parts, I have put timestamps in the description below, but once you're here, make sure you like and subscribe for more triathlon content. Let's get started. The first thing I would get is one of these, which is a tri-suit. Now, this isn't essential. You could do it in shorts and t-shirt and change if you wanted, but this for me is just the most comfortable and most practical option. It's basically a suit you wear for the swim, the bike, and the run. When looking for a tri-suit, try find one which is nice and tight, because ultimately this should fit like a second skin. For the swim then, what you're gonna need is a pair of goggles. I'll usually pack 2 pairs of goggles. The first one will be a tinted pair if it's sunny, and the second set will be a clear pair, which I will use if it's a dark morning, and also then in training in the pool. Now for training, you may want a swim cap, usually if you want to keep your hair out of your face, but in racing, these are usually essential and they're usually provided by the race organizer. For some swims then, if it's wetsuit legal, you will obviously want a wetsuit. And again, when it comes to a wetsuit, look for one which fits like a second skin, but that has enough movement around the shoulders, because ultimately you're going to need to be swimming in the wetsuit, so you don't want something too restrictive. I have this one from Zone 3, which has done me for several years, and it's a perfect beginner's wetsuit. Finally, for the swim, I quite like to use some earplugs. And you don't have to use earplugs, but I find they stop the water going in my ears and stop me getting imbalanced when I come out of the water. You'll often find in triathlon that you'll get people falling all over the place when they come out of the water, and that's usually because the water in their ears has stopped them to lose balance. So I just pop some of these in my ears. As soon as I get off the swim, I take the swim cap off, take the earplugs out, goggles off, and then just pop them in transition, and that stops me feeling all wobbly. Once you have then come out of the water and into transition, the first thing you're going to want to do is put on your helmet. Now, depending on how serious you're going to take your race, you've generally got 2 types of helmets. This one here is a normal road bike helmet, and then this one here is a triathlon specific helmet. If it's your first time doing triathlon and you are not too concerned with speed, a normal road bike helmet will do the job perfectly. If I'm then using a road bike helmet, I do often like to bring some sunglasses. So what I'll do is put my helmet on first, my sunglasses over the top, and then my eyes are protected when I'm doing the race. If, however, you are chasing time and you do want a specific triathlon helmet, you can usually get one like this, and then it usually has a visor built in the front. This then is basically more aerodynamic. It usually cones off at the back and is usually just a lot quicker when you're down in a time trial position like this, as it brings the air around you and saves you a bit of watts. Now the next thing I do when I get into transition is I always put on a race belt. In races, you're always required to have a number on the front for the run and then on the back for the bike. The issue is, if you don't have a race belt, you have to have a number pinned on the front or on the back, or switch it in transition, and changing 4 pins is just wasting time. So the solution to that is to get one of these. It's called a race belt. You basically pin your number on the front just like this, and then you go into transition, you simply do up the back, and then for the run it can sit on the front, and then for the bike you just move it around the back, and then you can have your number on show so that you meet the race rules. Now at this point, I do want to bring up nutrition as well, because that is a very important factor when it comes to triathlon. Ultimately, if you limit your fuel, you will be limiting your performance. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but I usually like to go for a balance of liquids like an energy gel, and then a solid like a chew, a bar, or a banana. Generally, you want anything above 80 grams of carbohydrates an hour. The pros are now going up to 100, 120, 130 grams. But basically what you can do is with gels like this is you can just do the maths and figure out how much you need. But all I would say is test the gels which you're going to use on race day in training. Otherwise, you could be spending quite a lot of time on the toilet during a race, which is not what you want. Trust me, I've been there. For the bike then, if you're doing it in trainers, you would just simply pop on your run shoes and cycle in your normal trainers. But if you've got clip-on pedals for your bike, you will likely want a cycling specific shoe. These shoes here are normal road bike shoes, and they just clip into the pedals at the bottom like this. What I usually do with these is elastic them onto my bike so that my shoes are on my bike. I can jump on my bike and get ready to go. Now, if you are chasing seconds in your race, you may want a triathlon specific shoe, rather than a road shoe. The difference between these is they usually have a hoop at the back so you can elastic your laces on your bike, and then they usually open up much wider as well, and that means you can get your foot in easier. And they also then have more ventilation on the bottom of the shoe, because once you've come out of the water, your feet will be wet, and it will help just bring the water away from your shoes so that your feet are dry on the bike. Now, another top tip here is to bring some talcum powder, put a bit in your shoe, shake it around and get rid of the excess. That will help dry out your shoes as well. Finally, for transition, you may want to bring a small towel. Now, the triathlon rules have changed recently, only allow you to have a specific size towel, and it's usually got to be rolled up in your shoe. I often don't bother with a towel, such as things for a sprint distance or Olympic distance, but anything longer, I do like to wipe down my feet because I'm probably spending a long time on the bike. For Ironman races, this will have to be in your bag, so I usually pop it at the top, bring that out first, dry my feet as I'm putting on the rest of my kit, and then I'm usually ready to go. Now finally, I'm going to bring up socks, and I'm doing this here because some people like to put socks on before the bike, and other people like to ride and then put their socks on if they're going to put socks on before the run. Now, some people blister worse than others. I personally am very prone to blistering on the run, so I will always put on a pair of socks unless I'm doing a sprint distance triathlon. Any run above 10k, and I personally find it worth my time putting socks on. I will often go for a shorter sock than this just because it's easier to put on. But one tip as well is to roll your socks in half like this. So that way then you can just slip your foot in and roll the rest of the sock up just to save a few extra seconds. And finally, once we have come off the bike, we are then on to the run. Just remember for the run that you will need to bring your race number from the back to the front, just to make sure you meet the race rules, and so you can get some good photos of you on the run. Now for the run, I usually don't bother with sunglasses unless it's an extremely bright day, but what I do always wear is a cap. Now, if it's not too warm, I like to wear a black cap because I find it stays cleaner for longer. But when it gets quite warm outside, I find the black can be quite hot on my head and cause me to heat up very quickly. That's when I will go for a white cap. Now, I always race with a cap personally just because I find it keeps the glare out of my eyes. It stops the sweat dripping down my face into my eyes, and I just find it much more comfortable. If you are hot, then what you could do is just take your cap off, or you could do what a couple of the pros do and just turn it round, whatever floats your boat. But personally, I always like to run in a cap. I find it much more comfortable, and I find it helps regulate my temperature, especially in what you can do in really hot races is pick up some ice cubes, put them in your cap, and then put that on, and then you've got that ice to melt down your head, keeping your core temperature nice and cold for the entirety of the run. Now finally, for the run, what you will need is obviously a pair of trainers. But there's one thing you might notice about this pair of trainers here is that it's got these strange looking laces on the front. Now these are triathlon specific laces, and they are called lock laces. And the reason we use them in triathlon is because what you can do is undo it, and you can open up the shoe like so. What you can do then is, rather than tying laces, you just simply pull this down, so that way then your trainer is on your foot nice and tight, and that will just save you a few extra seconds in triathlon. Now a lot of people struggle with the comfort of these. That has been a problem I have experienced before. So ultimately what I like to do is warm up in these trainers as much as I can, so I know they are sort of right, and then just sort of go for it for the run and just kind of move them and maneuver them if I feel I really have to. But these do save a few extra seconds, so they are well worth getting. Finally, the last thing I would say about trainers is if you are racing and chasing seconds, you are probably worth getting a carbon plated shoe, such as this one here. You can see the plate at the bottom. And the reason that is because it helps propulsion. It helps essentially put a spring in your step, which can save you a few extra seconds over the course of your triathlon. Now these can be a bit more expensive, and they don't last as long often as a normal trainer. For example, these will do about 150 kilometers and then they are ultimately on their way out. And the reason is you often compress the carbon, and that's just the lifespan of it. It is expensive, it does save time, so have a think about what your priority is and then get a pair of trainers which you think are relevant to you. Now I think that is everything you should need to get you through your first triathlon. A couple of things I have missed out intentionally. The bike, I'm going to do a full video on triathlon bikes, but ultimately you will need a bike. All I'd say is make sure it's properly serviced and is working well. the race officials will check the brakes are working, and usually the bar ends are plugged properly. So check those before you go in. You don't want to be sent out because your bar ends aren't plugged or the brakes aren't working. So make sure you check that first. I've then missed out a Garmin. I personally use my Garmin watch for a triathlon, and I usually link it to a heart rate monitor, usually on my arm or on my chest, just so I can keep track of my statistics. Now, the reason I haven't included these is because I don't think they are truly essential. They are more of a luxury when it comes to triathlon. Personally, I always race with one because I like keeping track of my time, I like knowing where I'm at, and I like to pace myself. So if you do want a Garmin, that's definitely a good investment, but it's not absolutely essential. And I think that's everything. If you think I've missed anything, leave a comment in the comment section below. If you found this useful, I would be grateful for you to hit the like button and the subscribe button. It helps the channel grow. It allows me to make more content like this and help you guys with your triathlon journey. Good luck in your triathlon, and thanks so much for watching.